Hi, I'm Jon Kirkman. I'm talking to you today from Liverpool in England, and it's a very special event taking place today. We're going to be talking about this little beauty here. This is the brand new live Yes album, The Royal Affair, live from Las Vegas. And not only am I going to be talking about it, the members of Yes are going to be talking about it. And we've got a lot of questions that I want to ask and a lot of questions that the Yes fans have asked, because they've put the questions on the Facebook page. So guys, stand by for your interrogation on the new live album and probably quite a few other things. Steve, I'd like to start off with you first, if that's all right.
Okay.
The live album situation, it ticks a number of boxes for various reasons. And yes, I've done a number of live albums over the last 40 plus years. This is the latest one. How do you feel about live albums? What do they represent for you?
Well, yeah, they're the other side of the coin, aren't they? You know, studio records are studioized, and of course, live music's much more kind of, you know, driven, and there's the audience, and there's all the excitement, and we're trying to keep it all together, and you know, rock out. So it's a little bit more vibey, I suppose, in that sense. But you know, I love making records, and records are how the blueprint is set. But you get on stage and, you know, some of it rocks up a bit more than you think. And, you know, it's great fun. So it's really part of the thing we all love to do most, which is performance. So it has that performance value in it.
If I can ask you, this tour was special, although you've done tours before similar. I think they were Yestival tours. But this is the Royal Affair. There were other bands on there with you, including Carl Palmer, John Lodge and Asia. What sort of organisation goes into pulling a show together like this? Plus, your set is a shortened set as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, an hour 40 isn't bad. I think that's what we were doing. But basically, sharing the stage with other great musicians is always a thrill. And we do that, you know, we usually do it every other year, that we do some kind of a show with others. And this was really quite exceptional, with Carl opening with the ELP story, and then John Lodge came on and did his story, and then, you know, the Moody Blues, bits of Moody Blues, but lots of his own music. And then, of course, you had Carl and Asia. You had Carl again, and you had Asia, and then you had me with Asia, and you had Yes. So really, it was an exciting package, you know, to do. So we love doing that.
Billy, I'd like to ask you a question now, and I think it's actually quite a valid question, in that you never actually record one show. You're never just going to go, right, that's the one. There's always a number of shows recorded. So, Billy, if you can tell me how many shows were actually recorded, and why was the Las Vegas show chosen to be the one?
Well, as we're touring, we've done so many of these that I kind of learned after the first cycle that I should be taking mental notes of what's, in my opinion, was a pretty damn good show. And I have a little grading system. So after the song's over, I'll look at my tech and kind of go, give it a 4, or that one's a 7. And so now by the time the show's done, I can, you know, narrow it down and go view 4 or 5 really good shows. And chances are it's in there somewhere. Because obviously, you know, every show is 2 hours long. I mean, if you were to listen to the entire tour, you know, it's just impossible. So you got to kind of narrow the field. And there's just certain shows that are obvious in terms of vibe and feel. And, you know, you've got video now on YouTube to refer to. And so there's things about it. And just Vegas just felt on fire, and the band was smoking. And, you know, it was all played really, really well. And there was a great energy. So it just felt like the right thing to do. You know, it wasn't because I was born in Vegas. It had nothing to do with but I just think it's ironic. That's all I'm saying. But it was just a great show, and the right one to my ears of what to go for out of the ones I viewed.
Were there many technical difficulties? Because obviously the tour was split between indoor venues and outdoor venues. So did that present any problems?
Not for us, because we've got such amazing engineers working with us that what is being recorded is just nailed, and it's so consistent from night to night in terms of microphone placement and the, you know, line trims and all the techie stuff that goes into doing that, then it's the weather has something to do with it, and really the inside environment not so much. I mean, a little of the ambience comes in, but for the most part, you're getting those microphones right in front of the things you want: the kick, the snare, the guitars, the bass. So it's consistent, and so that makes it easy.
We've also got to add that there was no fixing, because a lot of live albums from the 70s, everyone, we need to go and fix that in the mix and overdub. This is straight as it was, then maybe EQ'd, and that's it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, how are we going to possibly reproduce that? All of our gear gets sent to a building and is held hostage till the next tour starts.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that point, because some people think live albums aren't quite as live, but I know certainly the last 7 or 8 live albums from Yes have actually been the real deal. Yeah.
I mean, we rehearse. I mean, I'm sure the other guys can attest. We put the time into it before we get to rehearsal, so we're not bothering each other with, like, is that a B flat or is that an A? We've gone past that at home. We come together and play, and it comes together, and we spend a good deal of time playing that show before we go out on tour. So it's, by the time you're into the middle of the tour, it's just smoking.
Okay. Well, the album sounds incredibly live. And when you put it on big speakers, it's like time to warn the neighbors.
Yeah. Good.
Jeff, I've got a question for you now. And this has also been asked by Laura Bell, who's a huge Yes fan. I'm sure you've met her over the years, because she goes to a lot of the gigs and the meet and greets. It's basically about your equipment. Now, I know for a fact that you have 2 rigs in terms of keyboard rigs, one for Asia and one for Yes. And she wants to know, and I want to know, of course, how difficult was it switching between the 2? Because the turnaround on shows like this is not very long.
Well, it's a case of programming up the keyboards to work with both Yes and Asia. So I was effectively using the same rig because, to get the size of my rig switched over to another rig would be virtually impossible in the time that we had. But it's pretty much the same stuff, but obviously the sound selections are completely different, because one has to be, I try to be sympathetic to the early Yes sounds, particularly, Rick Wakeman stuff, Tony Kaye stuff. I try and get as close to that as possible. And then, of course, when I'm doing my own stuff, it's a completely different application. But because you've got so many ways of programming keyboards these days, you can virtually get any sound you want out. So it's a case of really literally just working on it and getting the right sounds that work with a particular type of music.
Could this event, if you like, this show, could that have been done maybe, say, 20 years ago? I mean, technology has got to such the stage now whereby something like this is really just a matter of quick programming in. Whereas 20 years ago, this probably wouldn't have been as possible. If it was possible, there would have been a lot more to it, wouldn't there?
Yeah, indeed. I think that, if you go back to the Yes stuff, it's very, very, from a keyboard standpoint, it was very, very Hammond oriented. It was very acoustic piano, electric piano, mini Moog. Those kind of instruments were really essential to the music. But I think as I expanded more into Asia, I started to get into, the Fairlight and, polysynths and all that kind of thing. So it's definitely a different application, but it's convenient these days that you can get all those sounds out of a certain set of instruments.
I've got a question here for you, Jeff. I don't want to insult the guy by getting it wrong, but we'll say Emmanuel. That's easy. He's in America, I think, and he basically wants to know what's the toughest part of adjusting your rig at any particular concert, and do you miss the Moog these days? So,
yeah, I mean, it's a one-off instrument. It's the mini Moog is an essential part of kit, really. So if I get a chance to use one on recordings, I'll definitely go for it. But those old analog instruments are really timeless, and I think that it transcends through all kinds of music. Mini Moog is really an essential part of keyboard technology. And certainly, you know, when you hear all of the Yes stuff, and some of the Asia stuff as well, I use Minimo quite heavily. It's a vital sound in that, and progressive rock music has, you know, I suppose it's embraced that sound. This is one of the key elements, and mellotrons as well. You know, as I say, hammered organ, very, very important. So I don't think much has really changed in terms of the keyboard player having those kind of sounds at his fingertips.
It's just easier these days to have it, if you like, at the flick of a switch almost, isn't it?
Yeah, but you know, the thing is with a lot of those instruments is the technique is different. You know, if you play a mellotron, you can't play it like you play a piano. You know, if you play the Minimoog, you can't play it like you play a Hammond organ. And same thing. You know, there's a whole method of playing those instruments, like a Fender Rose or something like that. It requires, because the feel of the keyboard is so, they're all so different. So you have to kind of think in your mind, you know, what works in that environment.
I can say from a roadie's point of view that also they are a lot easier to control these days because you don't have to wait for them to warm up. That's
another thing. Yes, the old oscillators warming up and being out of tune. But I mean, it was part of the sound, and I think that in some respects it kind of made it, because there was that detuned aspect of stuff that really interacted with the other instruments and things like that.
Yeah, you gain something, I suppose, and sometimes you lose something, don't you? But the sounds that you have on this particular live album, to me, just sound like Yes. So I think job well done. Alan, I've got a question for you now, Alan. This is obviously going to be one that's right up your street. As we all know, there is a cover of Imagine on the live album because it was performed on the tour. But maybe some people don't know, because I know some people have asked why it was included. You were a founding member of the Plastic Ono band with John and Yoko and Eric Clapton and Klaus Voormann, and it was the 50th anniversary in 2019 of that particular band. You've said in interviews in the past that you actually didn't see the film that was played behind you till you looked behind you. But the actual Lennon, if you like, estate has been very, very good with you, haven't they?
Yeah, they've been very good. Actually, some of that footage before we did the tour, I'd never seen before, because when I did that documentary, Above Us Only Sky. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Which was great, and a lot of that footage, I think, came from that. And I did a huge interview in New York while we were on tour, and so I never really saw much of what was going on back there. So, you know, it was all interesting at the time, but it was so long ago for me. You know, it's like I didn't even recognize myself. You know,
it'll be the beard now.
I look like a little skinny runt that just comes from somewhere around the corner.
But you've managed to be a little more fed than those days, I think. I mean, back in those days, you were probably literally a starving musician. Things are a little better these days, I'm glad to see.
A bit like that. And it was a bit like, you know, it was more of the feeling between everybody while we were doing Instant Karma and the whole of the Imagine album. It was like kind of band feeling together, and we all sat around a table eating food and talking about the music, and did listen backs together, and it was really kind of a communal type thing, and really kind of enjoyed the whole atmosphere. But like I've told people many times, I was so young then. I was only 20. I didn't really realize what was going on until it all was over with. It was kind of like, oh, I did that.
Yeah, well, what you did was really, really good. And I've got a question here from Gary Brown, who is actually living in Las Vegas. Said he caught the show. was brilliant. Loved the version of Imagine, and he loved the fact that John Lodge came out. But he wanted to know, when was the last time you actually played it? Would it be? I'm sure you probably played it at a few Beatle conventions, haven't you?
Oh, I've played it so many times. You know, people say, go and do Imagine, you know. I mean, I've been doing it for the last 45, 50 years. So,
No, 50 years next year.
Yes, so it's constant. What I did enjoy a lot, though, was the way we treated it in Yes, thanks to Steve. Steve came up with some different directions for certain pieces that really went with the meaning of the song. And that's what made me feel good about it.
Yeah, it's a great version. It is a great version.
Yeah.
Steve, can I ask you, the solo on Imagine, because there's no guitar solo on the original version. How did you look at the song? And did you sort of want to go, okay, it's a great song, but we need to kind of yesify it?
I don't know how much we did that, but when I first heard it, I thought, you know, you couldn't change that. You know, and there was this mood in the record. It was like, well, that's that mood. You know, we can't really do that. But as it was fortunate, we kind of built it, and as we all got used to playing it more, the idea of a kind of guitar break opportunity, you know, I won't turn them down. But there again, it did feel like there was something else we could bring. You know, so a bit of improv. And, you know, moving on to the steel guitar was somebody else's idea, I think, although slightly in the back of mine too. But then I thought, I won't be that brave. But somebody said, why don't you go to the steel? So thanks, guys, for recommending stuff. And, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And it's a nice way of developing the tune without really interfering so much with the song, but just sort of using the structure, which I kind of felt a little bit, you know, I wanted to clear up some of the kind of movements. That's why the guitar arpeggiates some chords that are not so pronounced maybe on the record, but it's the way I heard it, and I still like it. So I think we might stick with that arrangement.
I think it's a beautiful arrangement, and it was the first track to be released from the album, and I think that you did a fantastic job of the arrangement collectively as a band. And I think with cover versions, it's a tricky thing. You can either go down the route of just doing it exactly the same, which is nice, but doesn't really add anything of your own personality into it. Or you can do it with adding some of your own sort of personal things into it. And I think that's what you've done with this. It still remains true to the original, but there's just enough yes in there, which is, of course, very important.
John, you know, you ought to ask John that question too, because he was the singer. Well, with John Lodge as well. John.
Yeah, John.
I'm here.
I mean, that's an iconic song. And I mean, you've been singing a lot of iconic songs with Yes over the years, but
Yeah, of course.
there's iconic, and then there's John Lennon. So,
Right.
I mean, when you were asked, well, we're going to do this, how did you feel about that? And thinking, oh.
Yeah, you know, it would be sacrilege to, you know, mix it up and change anything really. So I stuck to the, you know, the script really. It was just more about being involved in the arrangement that the band was putting together. I did recommend, Steve, I was the one that recommended the steel bit over the chorus and extending the solo. So I felt like I had a little bit more flexibility in helping adjust the arrangement rather than altering the vocal very much.
Well, I think it's a great idea. And as I said, whenever Yes do a cover, and they've done many over the years, particularly in the early years, they've always managed to make it sound like a Yes song, which I always think is probably the sign and the stamp of the band.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to ask you, regarding Imagine, John Lodge came on and sang with you as well. Was that just for this gig, or was that through the whole tour?
No, he actually did the last 3 shows. He sang the song with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so was that a spontaneous thing, or was it planned? Okay, we're going to do the last 3 shows with John coming on singing this
It was rather spontaneous. I was going up every night and singing Ride My Seesaw with him, his closing song.
Okay, yeah.
And we were spending so much time together on tour. We were traveling together all the time. I've been with his daughter since the last cruise. So I first met John on the last cruise to the Edge, and his darling wife, Kirsten. And of course, I met Emily. We fell in love, and we've been together ever since. So we got to travel very closely throughout that tour. And at one point, again, I was singing every night with Jon on Ride My Seesaw. I think at one point Jon sort of made a subtle hint that Imagine is his most favorite song. So
yeah, well, he was a contemporary of John Lennon's as well. So.
Sure, yeah. So at one point we just decided to do it. I checked it out with the band and they all said, of course, let's bring him on. So I asked him and he was elated. And the first of the 3 shows he sang was in Las Vegas. So that very recording was the first experience.
And you caught the magic on the album.
Magic, absolutely.
I'd like to ask you another question. The opening song, and I always get this wrong, but it's a Richie Havens song, and it's is it no experience needed, or no opportunity necessary, no experience needed? I always get that the wrong way around. That's that's 2 things. It's a very pacey song, and it's a very wordy song, and it was like literally from the beginning, you've got to hit the ground running. And for an opening song and a singer, it's like, I mean, how do you get prepared for that? I mean, do you do some exercises before you go on?
Well, I always do exercises, yeah. But I actually found that song to be really effective as an opener because I'm probably most nervy at the start of a show. And there's something about that song. It's less technical vocally compared to, the Yes canon. Yeah. And there's so much passion in it and energy. And so to go out there with all that adrenaline was actually, really appropriate, I thought, as an opener. I enjoyed singing that more than you can realize. It was fabulous.
It's a great opening song as well. And it's great to have it back in the set because I know Yes like to sort of concentrate on the classic era, but those first 2 albums, and there's only been a few songs from those first 2 albums performed by you guys in recent years, but those songs on some of those albums are absolutely incredible. And I think it's just turned it up a notch as well with the current lineup of Yes. I think this band is capable of doing anything across the catalogue, which is great.
Yeah, really.
Billy, another question for you. Regarding Relayer, it's not on the album, and we'll come to the reason for that in a minute, I guess. But I know you were saying you were doing a fair bit of woodshedding for the Relayer thing, and you got the Relayer tour, hopefully, fingers crossed, next year. Yeah. But how did you feel Gates of Delirium went down on this tour? Because it's the first time you played it with Yes live, I think, and it's the first time it's been played for quite some time.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I did my homework, and I had been doing my homework from when I was a kid. I mean, that was one piece of music that I used to play to every day, Gates of Delirium, when I was about 16 and getting my chops together, because I found it to be the most challenging of all Chris's stuff, not only the compositions, but the playing itself. So I had a pretty good grip on it going in. It was really just a matter of refining all the corners with the band and how we were going to negotiate it. But I think in general, the energy of the track is there and the spirit of it's there, and it feels like Gates of Delirium to me, and I'm a fan. So I thought it was pretty well played by everybody.
I've got 2 questions here for you, Billy, which we can combine into one from Lennon Ashton, and the other guy is Howard Fursko. And quite a lot of people ask these questions. Are you using Chris's bass lines as a starting point for you, or do you play them note by note? I mean, I'm pretty sure that you told me once you got into the stage where, you can play them note by note, but there's a couple of other things you like to put in of your own little stamp. Is that still the case?
Yeah. There's areas inside the music for some nuance, but for the most part, it's as I've said before when asked this, if you're going to play da 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 da, you better play da 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 right after it. Okay, that's kind of that, and then where those moments free up inside things, or things might get a bit repetitious in terms of the bass line, I might switch it up here and there just to add a little groove, depending on what's going on. But for the most part, I paint within the lines because I've always respected Chris's compositions as a bass player more than anything. I mean, his playing, his chops, his ability was always off the scale. But the thought process of putting these notes together like that and using substitutes against the chords and these melodies that fall, that's what, for me, was the magic of Chris's thing. And, I can't let that go, just to play.
You have to remember, of course, as well, and everybody has to remember this, that Chris was the guy that wrote these lines in the first place and sang over them. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Very special.
You know, Chris and I had a lot of discussions along our path over these many years about various bass lines, and it got to the point where I would kind of remind him of things. He's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, pretty sure." And then we'd listen. He's like, "Yeah, I guess you got that." So, by the time we reached this point, sadly, where I kind of took over for his spot, you know, he knew that I was taking care of his notes, so to speak. You know, and that's the most important thing.
And you have indeed made him proud, I would say, too.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Alan, another question for you, if we may, seeing as we are talking about next year's tour as well. People want to know why it has taken so long to get up to the Relayer album, bearing in mind that you guys have covered various albums live in a live setting. Why has it taken so long for us to get to Relayer?
I think you asked this before.
Yeah, I know.
I said that. Well, I think, you know, Relay is a special album, and there's a lot of very intense playing on that album. And I know we've kind of kept it in the background. I think part of the reason is finding a good place in the set to do it, and the set revolving around it. But it is extremely difficult to play the album, and I think the band was starting to rise to the occasion when we started rehearsing it for this tour. But obviously the tour got cancelled. But I'm pretty sure that next year we can handle a lot of it, or most of it, or all of it.
I must say, just to interject on the Gates of Delirium thing, that, you know, I would come to the rehearsals pretty much, you know, for each tour that I started playing bass, and just play little hints of it. And if someone would look over and go, "Is that?" "Yeah, it's that." And then the next tour would be like, "There's this bit coming up," until like these things were floating in the air, and I think it just was a natural, you know. It was like, "Guys, let's try this."
If I could hop in and say, yeah, I mean, we'd already been playing. You know, we got ready for last year by, you know, getting the Gates of Delirium under our belt, so that, you know, this year we could have played and learnt, you know, the other two songs, you know, to be over and Manchester. So in fact, we were really at ease with the Gates, you know, because we'd run it in the whole tour. So, you know, the next part was more, you know, not threatening, but it was more exciting, you know, Sound Chaser and to be over. There were big things that, yes, like you were asking, John, have not been played, you know, since the 70s. You know, it's an honour, but also, you know, there's a lot of, you know, history to dig up, you know, and find out about that music. It's very, very intricate, as Alan said earlier. You know, it is very intricate, and you know, Sound Chaser is one of the, you know, all-time killer intricacies.
There's a lot of notes there. There's a lot of notes involved.
That's right. Tony Kaye.
Sound Chaser in particular is a song that's very hard to get all of the speed changes right at the right time, all together. And it had to be a certain feeling in the room to do that. And it takes a long time to put that back together.
Yeah.
I had it down pretty well. Because I rehearsed it to death. And then COVID. And we don't go, and so now I've got other stuff to do. I'm not just playing Sound Chaser every day, but it just all has gone now. It'll have to all be there.
I know the feeling.
You have to play it a lot to get it right. You know, it's.
Steve,
I think when we did it, the whole reasoning behind that song was we had fast cars in those days, and I used to drive down to Virginia Water. And the reason those time changes came about in Sound Chaser was because I had a very fast Jaguar, and it was a stick shift, as they called it, and it was like going down the freeway, going from first gear, second, third, fourth, back to third, back to second. So I think when we got doing the song, we did that with the music, and it was very, very difficult to put together.
That's great.
Steve, if I can ask you, I mean, for me, Relayer is a very, very intense album. It took me a lot longer to get into that than even before with Topographic Oceans. Would you agree that it is an intense album and you really do have to get it right?
The key to getting it right on stage is obviously that we've all done sufficient homework. As Billy said earlier, that we don't keep stopping to find out whether it's a B or B flat. That is a killer. But basically, we might have to do that at times. But generally, it's the homework, and then it's that week, you know, when we pound along and we pace ourselves, but we get up to speed with playing the song, and that's the time most important, you know, because we've only got so much time to brush it up, but it should all come together. You know, the theory, and it usually works, is that by playing it together, we lock in on the feel and the time signatures and time changes, and we all feel like one thing. So we start playing the song and we all kind of like agree on where that is so that we can go floating along.
I mean, the band is playing some incredibly epic music in its, life, and doing tales and, things of the big things. So it's kind of just taking on those chunks and knitting them all together and getting it right. But Relayer was definitely the challenging adventure, but I think it's paid off and will, especially for the next tour.